Have you checked the children? Your little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
You got Jaime Fuego? Yeah.
And we are here to do a patron-requested review for the movie 13th Locker, right? That's what it's called?
Indeed. Correctamundo.
This one-
Anthology horror.
Yes, this one was requested by Ms. Marie. Thank you very much for sending this request. We love anthological horror, and Fuego recommended this after watching it, and I'm glad that I did. I thought there was one story that definitely stood out amongst the five that we got, but
That's how often it goes down. Is there's like a standout, and then there's everything else, which is, you know, borderline okay, and then not so good.
yeah, there's a couple that are good, and then there's a couple that are like, I could do without those.
Yeah.
So this is pretty standard fare for anthological horror. So overall, though, I liked the quality of it all. I wouldn't say that any of it felt like cheap compared to the rest
at
or
all.
anything
Yeah.
like that. So for the most part, I enjoyed this flick.
Yeah, dare I say, I didn't hate any segment. There wasn't one that was like, you know, oh, let's eliminate that from the proceedings. They were all solid enough with their storytelling, and it was a unique wraparound, which is one of the biggest things that I will, you know, give my little tip of the proverbial hat towards is the fact that, yeah, the way that they frame this, and we'll get into it in the storytelling, obviously, and our thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, the formatting of how the tales were told, I thought was pretty dope.
We'll jump into the storytelling.
Yeah. So there is a recent convict who is trying to basically make his way back into the world, and he is going to be a janitor at a like Western reenactment sort of place, almost like a, I don't know, Old Tucson Studios was a place here in Arizona that I remember going to as a kid where there were Western reenactments and gunfights and all that stuff. And yeah, so he's gonna have to be kind of in character working at this proverbial place, and the, I guess, managerial sort of dude who is basically bringing him on, and there's a very funny like back and forth with them initially in the film where he's trying to find out what he was put in for, and dude is being very like, you know, just tight-lipped about it, doesn't want to divulge any of his, you know, prior transgressions and so on. And yeah, that's where the storytelling basically comes from, is the manager, until we get to the implementation of the wraparound with the final story. So
It's really, to liken it to a film from more recent history, it is the exact same setup as the Mortuary Collection.
oh, okay, yeah, big
Where
time, which
it's-
we both liked as well.
Indeed,
Yeah.
where there's, you know, a new mortuary's assistant that's shown up and being literally guided around the entire mortuary by Clancy Brown, right? And who is
great in
telling,
that.
who's telling all the stories. Exact same thing here.
Yeah.
Or I should say, that's the exact same thing as this, because this was before.
2014. Yeah.
Right. So it's a you know, simple enough setup, but the crux of anthological horror comes down to the stories, right?
Yes,
So
big time.
while the wraparound is the one that is the most impressive story-wise, right? You get little beats,
Agreed.
and then you get 4 other stories being told by these characters in the wraparound, and then the wraparound itself is like 20 minutes at the end of the film to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So that is the 5th story,
shit.
and yet the strongest, which I think if you're gonna have 5 stories, one of them be the wraparound, it makes sense to make the wraparound the one that hits home, right?
Yeah,
Because that's where you're
and-
going to leave everyone.
And also the one that finishes the, you know, proceedings off and kind of ties everything together, so to speak. Although maybe, I don't, like, there's one tale in particular about somebody who's wanting to jump off of a building that rivals the final, like, kind of wraparound tale for me. Is
Honestly, I like
my favorite.
I like the first tale, so
Really?
let's do them in the you know,
In
maybe
the order, yeah,
that we
segue
like it.
through,
So
'cause we have 5 of them total.
the first tale is about a washed-up boxer, right? And it's not unlike the story of Daredevil's father, Battling Jack Murdoch, for anyone that is familiar with Daredevil lore, where Battling Jack is just a really talented boxer that's just gotten old, and so he takes a
Happens.
job
Yeah.
as the you know, the enforcer for a local mob boss. That's the story of Battling Jack. In this one, it's as if Battling Jack, or our main character, this washed-up boxer, is about to be retired, whether he likes it or not, because even his manager is like, "You're done," you know.
Yeah, he can't pull anymore, man. I mean,
But he happens across this old pair of boxing gloves that he tries out in his next match, and he wallops the guy where he
I think
puts him in a
kills
hospital.
or-
No, he puts him in the
almost,
hospital,
almost,
right? We
that's right,
find
yeah.
out later.
Yeah.
Right, so he puts him in the hospital, and then
Almost
the
Pulp Fiction
manager
in
is
that
like, "Oh
regard.
my God, where did that come from?" He's like, "You got some heat on you now. They want to have another fight with this guy."
Yeah, we can book you in Vegas. We
Yeah.
can do all this different
And
stuff.
in the
yeah.
next fight, he literally kills the guy, and then he finds out that his first opponent got killed too. And the only difference is the gloves that he's wearing. So he basically tries to burn the gloves, and then what happens after that? I don't want to spoil it for you guys because it was
Definitely
actually a
not,
good
yeah.
twist. I
It
really
was.
liked the twist
Yeah.
when it happened. I was like, "Oh, of course! Oh, it's so good."
Yeah, it was
Very
definitely-
monkey's paw.
Yes, very much so. In fact, like reclaiming glory, but at a price, so to speak. Yeah.
So yeah, that boxing one I really dug. Honestly, I think that rivals the
Indeed.
wraparound for me.
Yeah.
So what's the next one?
And the next one is, since it's been a few weeks since I watched this,
I'll
it's,
fill in, but just
Okay,
remind
it's
me
the
of the
one about the
premise.
guy who was being put into and he's like a new inductee into a secret society.
Yes.
And then the older guy shows up and
So,
they're
yeah,
like
let me-
not
let-
like following protocols.
Right,
to
allow
his
me.
regard. And,
So,
yeah.
so yeah, there's a man who is being guided by Curtis Armstrong from
And there are-
Supernatural
there's a
and
lot
Revenge of the
familiar-
Nerds fames.
Dude, there's a lot of familiar faces in this film, actually,
Indeed,
which
indeed.
is interesting. Yeah.
So yeah, he's brought into this group of guys where they all wear fezzes. You think it's
Yeah.
like this Elks Lodge sort of situation,
It's
right?
relatively silly,
And
but
like
it's
they,
tradition. so-
right? They talk about this crazy induction ceremony. It's like, oh, we don't actually do that, And then they get there and like they make act like they. So it seems like everything's gonna be okay, but then this older, guy from the group, obviously someone that's
Very much a patriarch of sorts
of
of the organization.
organization, exactly. He basically shows up
Who
and
I've
says,
seen
"No,
in a
we have
lot
to
of
do it
things-
the real way.
Who I've seen
We
in a lot
gotta."
of things too. Yeah.
And so all of this stuff happens, and they basically threaten to kill this guy, like act like all this weird stuff's gonna go down, and he like just says, "No, I'm not gonna do it." And ultimately, they reveal that it's like faked, right? They're like, "Oh, we just wanted to push and see how far you go,"
it's
but
like a hazing kind of
but they
thing,
push him
yeah.
too far, and so
And
he
that's
goes a little
where-
nuts.
Yeah.
And so
And
it's,
there's a cutie coming out of a cake, which is
yeah,
fine and everything.
it's again,
and-
it's
yeah.
not unlike what happened in that one film from last year with the kids, right? Where the kids push the babysitter so far where she actually believes that they're all dead, and so she ends up killing them, and you know what I
Yes,
mean?
Yes, I do.
It's not
Yes, I
unlike
do.
that setup. Like there's a lot of prototypical horror stories in this film that were explored in full stories by movies 5-6 years down the line.
Yeah, and including another that's going to be a patron that we review today, I'm assuming, which is I'm Just Effing With You, which is a similar sort of setup of when you push somebody too far, what could potentially happen. You know?
Sweet. So what was the next story?
The next story is one of my favorites, actually. So there's a guy who is about to jump off of a building. He's like, he's
yes.
ready to take his own life, and then a mysterious figure appears up on the rooftop and is not even so much trying to coerce him not to do it, but just giving him a lot of insight about what may lie beyond and everything.
He talks
And
about how he's part of a group called the Suicide Club. And yeah,
it's
he
the dude from Boy Meets World. He was one of the minor characters on that show. I don't recall the name of the actor, unfortunately, but and he's got some longer hair, and he's very charismatically interesting. His performance is great in this segment.
Yeah, so he basically convinces the guy first that like, you probably have stuff to live for, and then when the guy won't make the decision, he's like, "Well, you know what? I'm in a bet and I've got 2 minutes left, so you should just kill yourself." And then like it just
'Cause we
changes
don't
on
want
a
to reveal
dime.
who this person is.
Yeah, and then he holds a gun to his head and he's like, "Make your call," and all this stuff. And it's actually a really interesting story I liked the payoff quite a bit.
I did too.
I thought it was a very
I could feel the white knuckle tension in this particular thing.
Again,
because
I feel
didn't
like-
necessarily know where it was going to go, which is always intriguing and just builds my interest.
It would be hard to do, and I understand why they did it in this format, but I feel like that storyline could sustain like an 80-minute phone
could
booth
easily
style
do a feature,
film.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Just between a
Absolutely.
guy and the person trying to talk him off the ledge.
Well, because the
100%.
dialogue was very well written between
Yeah.
the two of them. Most
I would
notably
love to see
from
that
our
expanded.
mysterious person.
I would love to see that expanded.
Yeah.
So that is a
that
good
was
one.
one of my favorite segments.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's one other story,
There was
which
one
is
other before the wraparound, and this is one about a. So there's a man who was involved in some dirty
Hispanic
deeds
hitman.
and stuff. Yeah, and he has multiple mistresses, and
well, it's about a Hispanic hitman who has 3 women tied up.
yeah,
Okay, and
all of which are mistresses of
all
a
of
certain
which
other guy.
are one of them is his wife, right? So
Yeah.
there's 2 mistresses and his
Once again,
and
a
the
minute
wife.
since I watched it, but
Yeah, and so he basically is trying to find out who attempted to kill this man.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And they've all, they've all got motive and stuff, and so he basically starts asking them questions and whittling them down, and if they don't answer correctly, pop, they get it in the forehead.
This was a very effective segment as well, now that I'm starting to recall certain aspects of it,
Yeah, and so he whittles it down,
mystery.
and it's about, do they turn on each other and try and get the other killed to
they're
survive,
all talking
and
shit to each other, jealousy and all that.
It's very rife with possibilities for drama, and they really milked it. They did a really good job, and then the reveal at the end of the film definitely is a good reveal, right?
Which is yes, definitely, and that's one thing that I definitely want to make mention about this. This is not full-fledged horror.
No,
this is more on the dramatic thriller sort of anthological spectrum, so to speak. But that doesn't mean it's any less effective.
Agreed. I would agree with that. But yeah, ultimately the stories were interesting enough that I think this is an anthology that's worth your time, and it's available for free on Prime if you have Prime.
It is, and and the final segment, which is where we return to our bearded dude.
Let's just say that it's a multiversal story, and
Very
you guys
much
know how hot multiversal stories are right now.
Yeah, and yet this did it 8 years ago, so I mean, props to them, and you get to see Homie without said beard and an alternate version of himself, potentially from a future alternate universe.
So there is a locker thread. The film's called 13th Locker, and there's a thread where in each of the films there is a locker with the number 13. Yeah. And this one is no different. This has to do with the 13th locker that is more of a window into another reality. And they play that really, really interestingly. And again, that's why it's one of the if not the strongest story.
Yeah, less Tales from the Crypt, more amazing stories, I guess.
I would say more Black Mirror.
Okay, yeah. Even better assessment, actually. Now that I think about it, which is coming back. But,
yes, indeed. So I think rather than diving into the acting and the effects on all of it, let's just go overall with it. I think the acting worked great for all the stories that we got, and the effects were very appropriate for each of the stories. Like, this film definitely held its own, especially as an anthology.
Yeah, and they did not try to overstretch their boundaries, I guess, budgetly, and because there's not CGI or anything, it's all practical, whatever. But there's not really a lot of gore or craziness in that regard, anyway. So it wasn't necessary. And I have to give a shout out to Ms. Marie specifically because I'd never heard about this movie. Ever.
Yeah. No, definitely.
It was one that fell through the cracks. That it was obviously a smaller, lower budget sort of thing, but they did a lot with the money that they had. And I'm not gonna sing the praises that it was amazing, but it was very solid.
Agreed. So yeah, I think let's go ahead and call it there.
Yeah,
thank you again, Ms. Marie. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. We do recommend this film, so definitely check it out if it sounds interesting to you. Thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
And Gracias, I've been Jaime Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.